Welcome to Umbrella Rebellion. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Dee.
We are finding healing after leaving a cult.
We will be discussing abuse and personal experience with the ATI, IBLP, and fundamental churches.
Trigger warning. This podcast may contain descriptions of various forms of abuse. Please take care for your safety and well-being while you are listening.
If the content becomes too much for you to handle, please turn this off. We hope to expose harmful teachings that lead to and justify abuse,
with the hope that those that are experiencing abuse can find support and escape from it.
Welcome back to Umbrella Rebellion. I am telling you, I did not realize how long this series was going to go. I thought I was going to be able to boom, 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 get through this stuff. It's like unpacking a suitcase that is way too full and you have to just go piece by piece. Because if you just rip something out from the bottom, it's going to make a big old mess. Let's just jump into this today. We are still on question number 17. How can I understand what is really happening in this complex world? With our exercise of Have You Been Deceived, Mr. Gothard? Please tell me. Spoon feed me the answers to your questions. Ask questions that are really weird and make no sense to shape my mind for me. All right, we have two more questions. We are on question 13 or statement number 13. Like some of these are questions, actually most of them, I don't see a question mark on here. All of these are statements. The key to good health is good food, good sleep, and good exercise. I know where this is going. Do you know where this is going? Pause it right now. I want you to go comment. What do you think the answer is? And where do you think this is going? I'm curious. Answer 13. False. The key to good health is not just food or sleep or exercise, but godliness. How did I know? A person's health is influenced more by guilt and bitterness than by food, sleep, or exercise. So he does have little footnotes here. Okay, so ADHD, I wasn't paying attention. There are verses and there's little numbers and they correlate to the ones down there. I'm just dumb. Don't mind me. Okay, so back to the verses that actually apply. This verse is 1 Timothy 4:8. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come. Interesting verse. And just one verse. You can base your whole entire worldview and opinion of different topics if you pull one verse out of the Bible that supports your claim. Supposedly. This answer confuses me, and I'll tell you why. It's not because I don't understand what he's saying. It's because of the mixed messages you get in this cult. So as a woman who was in this cult and who lives in America and understands beauty standards according to America, there was emphasis on being presentable outwardly to attract a mate or keep your husband interested. The confusion comes in that you are sitting here saying that godliness is above exercise and eating and all of that. A part of his cult was controlling what you ate and also the silent rules of appearance and the threat of being judged as a glutton if we're skinny enough, right? So he does say it's not just food or sleep or exercise, but godliness. And I wish I remembered enough about his health and dietary stuff to remember some of the stuff that was crazy about that stuff. I don't know, I was 14 and drinking barley green with my mom. I remember my mom going through a carrot juicing phase, like there's so many things that fads and trends where it came to diet and, stuff that we followed. It was almost like that was connected to how godly you were. So that's why it confuses me, right? Because there was so much in the form of what you ate and what you put into your body being focused on and your outward appearance for a woman to be pleasant to men, but not too pleasant, just pleasant enough. Only attract just your husband to be, but not enough to attract somebody who's not meant for you. Make it make sense. It's control. We're just sitting here trying to control every little thing that you do. And so this is directed to men. I'm reading this as a woman and I'm thinking, what was I taught as a woman? So guys, I know there's a few guys that watch my videos. So I would like to know if you were under the teachings of the men's teachings or boys' teachings, what were the standards when it came to diet and physical fitness that you remember from this cult? The only thing that I really remember as far as like health and appearance standards was Alert, right? And Alert was their paramilitary group, and they were training men to be an army for the Lord. That buff, military, prim, fit, short hair standard that, the military is going to have again. I don't know. That's the only standard that I recall really being pushed, or dressing a certain way, like the girls had to dress a certain way, the guys had to dress a certain way. So, yeah, I mean, I guess as a woman, it'd be very hard for me to understand what messages might be wrapped up into this statement that I wasn't aware of, or what teachings were taught to boys or men that I wasn't aware of that would tie into this. But I know how it ties into the teachings to women. You have to be attractive enough, but not too attractive. So that's why the godliness tied to dietary and exercise. Like, it was almost, was it written or unwritten? Like, somebody tell me, because that's what I recall feeling. That I can't pinpoint something that I heard or remember being taught, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, about being a skinny person and eating healthy and having a bunch of dietary restrictions. Godliness is your goal, and it's not just food or sleep or exercise. This is what I'm going to guess the goal of this statement is, and answer is to not make health and wellness your God. Do y'all agree? And that you have to worry about it, but don't worry about it so much that it becomes a God. And for many, many women in this cult, dietary restrictions and health and wellness became their secondary God. And they spent a lot of time chasing health. I don't know what else to add, and it's getting kind of a long video. So I don't want to take too much time, but yeah, I would really love if some guys would jump in and give their input about this statement and kind of get it from y'all's perspective, since this is a book speaking to men and I don't have that experience. Today, we are going to hit the last statement question thing that we were working on. And so we will actually be moving on to a different page. Woohoo! Okay, again, question number 17 is what we are still on. How can I understand what is really happening in this complex world? And Bill Gothard gives us an exercise to control our minds and what we think. And I forgot I've chopped off statement 14, so I need to open the book. Statement number 14. The history of mankind is simply a continual repetition of itself. Let us see what dear leader Gothard has to say about this. I love how all of these are false. What's the point in a true false question if none of them are true? What is that? That's got to be something psychological. That has to be like a manipulation tactic. Any therapist in this group, any psychiatrist in this group, tell me if I'm onto something here. Before we get to the answer, please make sure that you're following us on whatever platform you are listening to us right now. You can also find us on Substack, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. I am focusing most of my energy on TikTok, YouTube, and Substack. You can subscribe to us over on Substack. If you have the means, please consider doing a paid subscription to help support this work and cover some of the costs associated with producing this podcast. Let's get to the answer now. 14, false. History is not continuous repetition. It is God's program for man built around the person of Jesus Christ. There is a beginning and an ending. Within this structure, there are repeated lessons to mankind about Christ and his standards of living. History is his story. Hebrews 1 and 2. I am not reading 2 whole chapters of the Bible. That would make this insanely long. So I'm going to go read it real quick. And then if you want to go read it, pause, go read it, and then we'll talk about it. I read them. I skimmed over them. I was terrible at being a Bible reader. It's just boring. What I'm gathering of these verses, these chapters, it's the prophecy of Jesus and how he fulfilled it. And I'll just read you the first. God, who at sundry times and in divers manners, which means divers means diverse manners, spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, blah, 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 making him lower than the angels, but above us, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then put all things in subjection under his feet, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends with, for in that he himself has suffered being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted. So, it's the whole, Jesus is the fulfillment of the prophecy, and he knows our pain because he was human. Did I get that right? Did I summarize that correctly? Because not a Bible scholar. Bad at reading Bible. Good at listening to what I was supposed to think about the Bible. Let's read that answer again. History, prophecy. Got it. That's why we're talking about history, because prophecy. Got it. I was confused again why these chapters were relevant. History is not continuous repetition. It is God's program for man, built around the person of Jesus Christ. There is a beginning and an ending. Blah, 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 blah. So this is just him talking about the prophecy that was in the Old Testament and how Jesus is a fulfillment of that prophecy, and that history can't continuously repeat itself. Otherwise, what's the point? Because if God is just going to have every couple of generations repeat the same shit again, obviously we're not learning. So obviously, that's why he says that. You agree? What are your thoughts? Has history repeated in your lifetime? Is there anything that you feel is a repetition within your lifetime? So we've reached the end of this page. And yes, there was references. I was wrong that there wasn't. I'm right again that there was reference. I was just using it wrong because I'm a woman trying to read a man's book, I guess. So what I think I'm going to do next is at the beginning of the book, it kind of gives you an introductory, gives you a how to use this book thing. And I think it might be good for us to address that. Maybe I'll understand how to use the book. And there were some things in there that I wanted to, like in the introductory and like the first couple of pages, that I think was important to highlight about this book and about the reason that this was created and what expectations of men Bill Gothard had, because kind of opened my eyes a little bit to why some things happened the way they did, and maybe understanding the harms that were also done to the men. A lot of survivors talk about what happened to us as women, and some of the men don't want to talk about their harms because they feel like it will diminish ours. And I will say that here, harm is harm. I think it's important for us to understand both sides. And I think it's important to us to understand what standard they were being held to for us to understand some of their decisions, right or wrong, indifferent. I think it will help us understand. Might make them a little bit more human to us, unfortunately. I mean, if you can't laugh about it. So I think that's what I'm going to do next. So the last couple of weeks, we have been going through a random page that I opened it up to, and it was so steeped with all kinds of malarkey, shenanigans, false teachings, lies, manipulation, and essentially, in my opinion, part of the grooming process. We are going to go ahead and move on to the introductory of this book. I thought it was important enough for us to get the foundation of what Gothard's purpose of this book is that he portrayed in his introduction. And there's some weird things in it. So I just want to remind you that this can be very triggering. I will be okay if you can't listen to any of these episodes. So if at any point you feel like it is too much for you to continue listening to our podcast, please turn it off. Your mental health and well-being is far more important to me than views. Let's get into this introduction and see how he sets up this whole entire book. What is the purpose of this manual? This manual is designed to pinpoint the basic scriptural convictions which a father must have in order to avoid rebellion in his children and reaction from his wife. Precise steps of action. I had to process that for a second. This book is going to piss off your wife and kids. So here's how you do it to keep them in line. Precise steps of action are given on how to establish and maintain these convictions in personal living, marriage, family, and business. The purpose of this manual is to give fathers basic guide by which they can teach their sons and daughters to be wise in God's word and mighty in God's spirit. So much of the education of our day is not founded on basic principles or scripture, nor is it teaching or reinforcing scriptural convictions. Instead, it is undermining the very foundation of godly wisdom and character. The time has come for fathers to reclaim the primary responsibility and the direction for teaching their own sons and daughters. The scriptural authority for a father to teach his sons and daughters is clearly established, and these words shall be in thine heart. He's quoting scripture. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. A child is under tutors and governors until the time appointed by the father. Galatians 4:1-2, if you want to look that up and read it. For grandfathers, because it's not enough for fathers to be above a family. Grandfathers also have to be. Okay. For grandfathers. A grandfather's responsibility for his sons and daughters does not end when they finish their education or when they are married. There it is. That is why when adults become adults in the cult, they still think that you should listen to them as parents or grandparents. That right there. His responsibility continues for as long as he lives. You're saddled with those adult children and you never get free of them because God knows they can't decide what to do without you. Until you die, then they're going to be fine. Please tell me that I am not insane. He's insane, right? Okay, just check it. God knows the strength and stability of a family depends on the wisdom and dedication of the grandfather. Thus, he commands them to remember the principles and ways of God and to teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. The time has come for grandfathers to renew their responsibility and commitment to each member of the family and to work with each one on the basis of scriptural principles and convictions. When the hearts of fathers and grandfathers are turned toward their own sons and daughters, we will raise up the foundations of many godly generations and escape the judgment of God upon our land. So let's talk about this. Putting the responsibility of you have to have certain spiritual convictions in order to keep your children from rebelling and for your wife not to have a reaction. Remember that, because the wife's reaction is going to be something that you need to remember because it's relevant for later. Sneak peek. To me, this is putting a lot of responsibility, which, I mean, in their hierarchy, yes. That's a heavy weight to carry until you're dead. And that explains a lot about how family structures were in the cult. It explains a lot how even when there was supposed to be separation from one family to the other, parents and child's family, that they felt an obligation to continue to be responsible for everything that their children did. And a lot of these families have multiple 6, 8, 12, 15, 20 children. Imagine the weight that you would feel for every decision that your children made from the time they were born till the time that you died. And imagine what carrying that weight would do to you as a human being. That seems incredibly heavy. Do y'all agree with me? This may reframe some of my thinking about the fathers in this cult. Not that I absolve them of responsibility, like, don't get me wrong and don't get my words twisted. But when we are under extreme pressure from an outside source to operate under a certain belief system, I really think that you might do things that are outside of what you would do if you did not have, obviously, if you didn't have that outside pressure, right? And why a lot of parents parented out of fear. They were afraid of their own judgment for how their children behaved, acted, and decisions that they made. So that's where that teaching comes from, at least one segment of it. Now we understand that it wasn't necessarily the parents doing, like, it wasn't what the parents necessarily wanted. It's what they were following to hopefully have a godly life and godly family. So they felt like they couldn't let go. They felt like they would fail. Many different beliefs. So some people believed in eternal salvation and you could never lose it. And some people believed that you could lose it. So they were either worried about losing their salvation if they allowed their adult children to make their own decisions and make mistakes, or they were worried about having a tiny house instead of a mansion, or having less crowns and accolades and status. That's another thing we're going to have to unpack, is that whole, status thing of, if you do well, you get more. And why are you trying to accumulate so many eternal brownie points at the expense of your children and your wives? Because this is written to men. I'm addressing the men. So it was at the expense of your children and wives that you were trying to attain either eternal salvation, if you thought you could lose it, or a tiny house instead of a mansion, or, I don't know, being homeless on the street. It's Gold Street, so, So you were worried about status, and this is why you did that. Either eternal status or status within the cult. Let that sink in. Maybe think about that, and maybe think about what your children and spouse went through, wife went through. And if you haven't taken accountability for your decisions and participating in this, it might be time to sit down and to really evaluate your reasoning behind doing this. And I understand it was wrapped up into a pretty little bow of godliness. And so you used godliness as the excuse, but the root was status. That makes me sad for all of those children and spouses who were harmed and are still being harmed because of your ego. Little man syndrome. Man, sometimes it hits you hard. That is heartbreaking. Like, I knew it, but seeing it in black and white is totally different. I don't even know what else to say. Guys, it was ego that hurt you. You were collateral damage in an effort to gain status. God, that sucks. And so was I. And so were my siblings. Man, you might need to go schedule a therapy session after this one. It's a little rough. I think we all knew it. Does it hit different when you read it than just believing that that's what it was, or knowing that's what it was? but does it hit different since it's in black and white? I don't even think I have to ask if you agree with me on this one. I don't have anything else to add, and I don't think I could come up with anything else to say. Take care of yourself. Figure out what you need to do to heal. The wounds are deep. And if you're a parent that went through this and your children keep telling you that they were hurt by it, believe them. And here's your proof that you were set up and manipulated. He played your ego. He played your humanness against you. And your children were collateral damage. How many tens of thousands of family did that man destroy? And it still exists. I'm going to end this a little bit differently today. If you were a child that was raised in this, or even an adult who joined, and you've seen that this was harmful and this was used to abuse you or mistreat you or control you, you did not deserve that. You deserve unconditional love. You are perfect just the way that you are. And you do not owe your parents another goddamn thing. You do what you have to do to protect yourself, to heal, and to recover from the damage that was put upon you, all in the name of ego and status. I love you guys, and thank you for listening.